Hello and welcome to the Ken 7 podcast, and we've got another football chat, and joining me today for a little chat is none other than Mr. Transfer himself, James Pearce. James, how are you, mate?
Very good, thanks, Gav. You okay?
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. We'll crack on because I know you're a busy man. First of all, what I just wanted to ask you about was, because I've not spoke to you for quite a while, I just wanted you to try and review that season that we've just had. It was, pretty unbelievable. Not the season we expected, but we got a decent result in the end. I mean, how did you see it?
Yeah, it was a real roller coaster of emotions. I think it was, when you break it down, it was almost in kind of three chunks. I think, the first half of the season up until Christmas and New Year, there was obviously problems, but for a long time, Liverpool looked like they were going to kind of really triumph in the face of adversity, despite losing Van Dijk and then losing Gomez. The fact that still top of the Premier League at the turn of the year, and you're thinking, well, maybe they can actually go on and retain the title. And then, of course, from then through to kind of March time, the wheels absolutely came off. Unprecedented in Liverpool's entire history to lose 6 on the bounce at home, and confidence just looked absolutely shot to bits. Of course, the injuries played a part, but it was also, key personnel seemed to have lost their way. And at one point, I think probably after that home defeat to Fulham, I think most Liverpool fans, and probably myself included, just wanted the season to end, because you just thought, this is just a mess. Nothing's going to be salvaged from this. And then I think you've got to give Klopp and his staff and all the players a huge amount of credit for the way in which they dug themselves out of that hole, because of course third place wasn't where Liverpool wanted to be. It wasn't where they wasn't the target when they set off at the start of the season, but that was a hell of an achievement when you think of all the obstacles thrown in their path to not only qualify for the Champions League but to climb as high as third was very, very impressive.
Of course. I must admit myself, I thought we were the only team that could put a run on, but there was no evidence whatsoever to suggest that we could actually put that run on. And the fact that it came so late in the season, like you say, it's testament to Jurgen Klopp and his team that they stuck with it. There was a lot of calls for, I think we need to change formation, we need to change the way we play, we maybe should drop the defensive line 10 yards, to compensate. And they didn't do that. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think Klopp, first of all, he doesn't panic. Even when things were really bleak, I'd speak to people behind the scenes, and they'd say, no, he's, if anything, he's even more positive, he's even more buoyant. I think Klopp knows that probably his job is even more important, when things are so difficult. And there haven't been many difficult spells for him during his coming up to 6 years at Anfield. But yeah, I think he stuck to his guns. I think I think there were some big decisions he made that ultimately paid real dividends. I think the biggest one was definitely restoring Fabinho to the holding midfield role, because I think hindsight's a wonderful thing, and you can say, he should have done it earlier, but I think he was surprised himself, Klopp, by just how much Nat Phillips came on over the course of that season. And I think it went almost from like thinking, well, you can play Nat Phillips against a certain standard of opponent who play in a certain way, maybe where it's all about winning aerial duels, to actually go, well, actually, Nat Phillips has proved himself against top opposition here. He's played in big Champions League games. He's got the temperament, he's got the technique, he's got the belief in himself. And then, that obviously enabled Klopp to stick Fabinho back in his rightful position. And then I think we just saw the knock-on effect of that, because it's no coincidence that Thiago played his best football of the season when he had Fabinho back alongside him in midfield. It gave him a bit more freedom. I think we saw earlier on in the season that, when Thiago's left to carry out a lot of the defensive midfield duties on his own, that's not really his game. So I thought, from having a really tough first season in England, Thiago ended up in the kind of form that just absolutely whets your appetite for what he can go on to achieve for Liverpool next season. So yeah, there was, and obviously Salah's goals were massively important as well. You know, Firmino, someone who'd taken a lot of stick, he scored some important goals during the run-in. So yeah, when the stakes were high and when, you know, it looked like the season had gone, that was a fantastic effort all round. And I think, you know, I saw some people scoffed when Klopp said, you know, getting top 4 ranked alongside, you know, his biggest achievements. But I think he was spot on. That wasn't just a manager. Sometimes managers say things just to put a positive spin on a disappointment. But yeah, when you think that, you know, the fact that, with the greatest respect to Nat Phillips and Reece Williams, back at the start of the season, no one would have believed you if you told them that you'd be going into crunch Premier League games with those two at the back, because they were effectively the 5th and 6th choice centre backs.
No, I completely agree with that, and I sometimes think, or I have thought, that the experience we've had last season is going to stand us in good stead for the next few years. You know, the fact that they've overcome that adversity, and they've overcome adversity before, of course they have, but I don't think anything really compares to what we've dealt with last season. And there was one of the players' quotes was that they felt they were running in quicksand. It didn't matter how hard they worked; it just got worse and worse and worse. So I'm hoping that that's going to stand us in good stead for next season, and maybe a few additions to the squad will help that. Just what you get your reaction to the fixture list, which has been announced today. I don't know whether you've had time to have a look at it, and I'm sure you possibly have had a quick look at it. What's your reaction to it?
Yeah, I think it always makes me laugh a little bit when there's a bit of a buzz and excitement when the fixtures come out, and I always just think, you know what, does it really matter when you play different teams? And there's always a quick look in there to see. You always look to see when the derbies are at Goodison and when you play United, and probably the Christmas fixtures. But no, I think it's been. I wouldn't have any complaints with that. I think, you know, obviously Norwich and then Burnley is a relatively gentle introduction to the new season, and then a really big game against Chelsea at home, and then Leeds away. So yeah, I don't think Liverpool can have any complaints about, you know, what they've been given there. And, you know, the other thing with the fixtures is, of course, you look at the fixtures, but you know full well that once the TV companies get hold of them, they'll bear absolutely no resemblance to what we've seen come out today anyway. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, because I think more than anything, just touch wood, the prospect of Anfield being full again, because even on that, the last weekend of the season, even though it was only a small number of fans allowed back in, it just makes one hell of a difference. And I was very fortunate to be able to still go to Anfield all the way through the football played during the pandemic, but I'd be lying if I said to you it was a particularly enjoyable experience, because it was absolutely soulless without supporters. So that's the big thing I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the Echo have done a little bit of an in-depth look. I had a quick look, and they said that it's quite favourable for us after Champions League games, which is always a big thing once you get into the season. But I totally get your point that it doesn't really matter what the fixture list is like. It does look like quite a balanced set of fixtures, does it? There doesn't seem to be any bottlenecks where you're playing the top 6, which I think we kind of had this season. Do you think that the Champions League aspect of it is quite an important thing, and that's felt favourably for us?
So yeah, I think I haven't had the chance to properly study all the dates yet, but no, certainly from first glance, I think Liverpool can be pretty happy with the cards they've been dealt.
I think one of the other things I picked up was that there's only 2 league games during that Africa Cup of Nations period. Is that, from your understanding, is that how it's going to work?
Yeah, well, I think that's mainly because there's two rounds of the FA Cup, I think, scheduled for January, which probably helps Liverpool a bit, to be honest, because with I think we've seen under Klopp that the FA Cup isn't exactly high on the list of priorities, and Liverpool have had a pretty bleak record in the competition in recent years that's tended to have been a mixture of having tough draws and the fact that he's used it to rotate heavily. So yeah, I think we're not sure exactly how long at the moment. Obviously, Mane and Salah would be away, and Keita obviously falls into that group as well, because I'm sure there'll be some kind of training camp leading up to the Africa Cup of Nations, and then obviously depending on how far their nations go in the knockout stages. But yeah, you're right. And even the fact that I think the two are Brentford and Palace, so it's not like you face the prospect of them, being away for City or United or Chelsea. So yeah, it's not ideal, is it? I think Klopp left anyone in no doubt what he felt about the Africa Cup of Nations being moved to mid-season again, because it does create a headache for him. But and I think that's something that has to be factored in when it comes to finalising the squad ahead of the new season, because you just have to make sure you've got sufficient cover in that department.
Of course. I was lucky enough to just pick up before we spoke that you've just written an article about John Newby in light of the Christian Eriksen incident that happened in the Euros. Do you want to just talk us through that?
Yeah, I mean, not John Newby. A lot of Liverpool fans would remember the name from Liverpool's FA Youth Cup winning team from 1996. He was, a striker, played in the same team, of course, as Michael Owen, Jamie Carragher, David Thompson. Went on to play 4 times under Gerard Houllier in the first team, and then had a decent career in the Football League with teams like Bury and Huddersfield, and then kind of dropped into non-league, and was lucky enough to spend some time with him earlier on this week. And he's had a really tough few years where his life has been turned upside down, really. It was towards the end of his playing career in 2014 when he started getting dizzy spells and collapsing playing football. And then it happened again when he moved into coaching. He was Liverpool under-11s coach at the academy. Alex Inglethorpe had got him on board there, and he again collapsed when he was taking a training session at Kirkby and had to be rushed to hospital. And it took them over 3 years to even try and get to the bottom of what it was. And then he was diagnosed with this rare heart condition. And has had to undergo surgery and had an internal defibrillator fitted, which he described it as almost like having a paramedic with you 24 hours a day, because it's if his heart the heart beat gets too high, then it regulates it and actually electric shocks him and brings the rhythm back to normal again. So he's had to change a lot of things in terms of his life. He can't obviously. He says about how much he misses playing football these days. Even basic things like having a kick around with his football mad kids is a very risky thing for him now. But yeah, I think it's what was nice to hear was he said that Liverpool, and in particular Alex Inglethorpe, have been absolutely amazing to him. He said they couldn't have been more supportive. He said because of his health concerns, it was pretty impossible for him to go back to doing his previous job, being out on the turf every day, because it just would have been too active and too dangerous for him. So Liverpool have appointed him as their Manchester recruitment scout for ages 9 to 13, and it's a job that he loves, and it means that he's still involved in football. So yeah, he said watching obviously what happened with Christian Eriksen brought back some pretty tough memories for him. But he's a very resilient and a very brave guy, and hopefully people will enjoy reading his story.
Yeah, I would advise anyone to just go and have a little read of that, because I found it fascinating. Very interesting that you said to me that the only 80% of people who have this condition get picked up in a post-mortem, not while they're alive.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, because I think probably a lot of people, and I probably asked myself the same thing after what happened with Christian Eriksen. You think, well, how can this happen in this day and age where we just associate, especially elite sport, with the absolute best medics, the absolute they must have every test under the sun. How do these things not get picked up? But he said these things are very, very difficult to detect. And you're right. That was the stat that he said. He was told that 80% of people with his condition, it's only discovered once they're actually dead, which is absolutely frightening, isn't it? And he said there isn't one test that can find this condition. It's a whole host of series of tests, and I think it was called cardiac mapping that he had, that where they kind of repeatedly speed up and then slow down your heart. That's what it took to establish exactly what was wrong with him. So yeah, it's I think for that reason, he just despite the changes he's had to make to his life, and he said it's tough as well, the fact that, every 6 months he has to take his kids for all these tests as well, because it is possible that they could inherit the same condition as well from him. But he is one of the lucky ones, because he is still around to talk about it. And he said it is tough mentally, I think, and he knows he's got a lot more surgery ahead, because these internal defibrillators that under the skin, just above your heart, they have to be replaced every 7 to 10 years, and that is a pretty it's not an easy thing to do, because the wires that connect the defib to your heart go through all the veins into your heart. So yeah, it's been a really, really tough few years for he's such a lovely, genuine fella, John Newby, and but yeah, it was, I think, just even saying recently, the FA Youth Cup winning team from '96 had like a 25th anniversary reunion in Liverpool city centre in a pub there, and I think he just feels very fortunate that he was still around to meet up with his former teammates again. And yeah, it's certainly something, I think, where there's definitely more research has to be done, because obviously, probably traditionally we think about heart problems being associated with people that aren't in very good health and aren't particularly fit, but it's just not the case. And he said, in fact, in his case, he was told that it was all the high intensity training that he'd done during a football career that had spanned over 20 years that had actually done the damage to his heart. And the other thing that he's pushing for, which I think is really important, and I've heard a number of other campaigners talking about it in the wake of what happened with Christian Eriksen, is the need to have these defibrillators available at every grassroots game, at every age group, because someone said to me it should be like you have a fire extinguisher in every building. It should be the same with a defibrillator, because you might not ever need one, and touch wood you won't, but if it literally is the difference between life and death. And John said himself that I think once you get beyond 3 minutes when you've had a cardiac arrest, I think every minute reduces your chances of survival by 7%, and that's why having these defibrillators nearby are so absolutely crucial.
No, it's a good point. It's good to see him doing well now. Is he going to take that further in terms of creating? Did he mention starting some sort of charity in terms of the grassroots?
Yeah, well, I think he's just throwing his weight behind those. I think there's a few existing charities that he's involved in. I mean, the guy who did the surgery on him is a very vocal voice. Professor Sharma, his name is, and so yeah, I think he's backing that campaign to try and ensure that there is, that on the back of this, because it is such a topical issue at the moment, that there is some kind of proper, lasting change to ensure that as fewer people as possible are afflicted by what is, it's a silent killer in many ways. The fact that it's, for some people, there isn't any symptoms whatsoever until they actually find themselves in that situation where they're in a cardiac arrest.
If you're enjoying this video so far, please show your support for the Ken 7 channel by subscribing, clicking the like button, and also clicking the notifications button as well to get future broadcasts. If you could also share the video on your Twitter and Facebook account, that will show YouTube's algorithm that you like our content. Have you heard about Ken 7 merchandise? The link is in the description of this video. We have premium fanwear for fans covering Liverpool, Celtic and Scotland, and it's fanwear for young and old, so we have t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, caps, mugs, you name it, we've got it. Just something else to remember, every purchase that is made on our website, we donate to the Marina Dalglish appeal, so you're helping a great cause as well. Of course. I can't have you on a podcast without talking about transfers. So first of all, you did an article by Ibrahima Konate's first coach, Reda Bekti. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Which I found quite interesting. What did you find out about Konate? Obviously, he's our first big summer signing. Yeah,
very intelligent, articulate, driven. I think certainly when you look at his background, it was myself and my colleague Kiva O'Neill, we spoke to kind of his first coach at Paris FC, and then his first manager at Sochaux, who gave him his senior debut and his captain at that club as well. And they all spoke glowingly in terms of the attitude and application of the man. I mean, he was thrown in at the deep end really when he was at Sochaux. I think it was a League Cup quarter-final in France, only 17, and Radamel Falcao was playing for Monaco that day, and ironically Fabinho was actually on the bench, I think, with Mbappe, and they said he was when he was told he was playing, not a hint of nerves. It was it was like, I'm going to go and study who I'm up against. I'm going to get myself an early night, and I'm going to focus on my job in hand. And so yeah, I think he comes from a really good family. That it's the people, the coaches were saying that his family really were adamant he had to continue his education. He moved the best part of 300 miles away from home as a teenager, mainly because they loved the educational setup at Sochaux and moving away from Paris where he grew up. But he absolutely blossomed. And the same, I think, you speak to anyone at Leipzig when he was still a teenager when he went there, and he just embraced everything around it in terms of the language, the culture, being an important part of the dressing room. And yeah, he has had some injury problems in the last couple of seasons. I think it was a hip flexor issue that obviously limited his amount of football. But he still played, I think, close to 100 games for Leipzig. And he's still so young as well for a centre back. And yeah, I think it's a really, really shrewd investment from Liverpool. And I think he just ticks all the boxes in terms of, he's a big hulking figure in terms of, powerful, 6'4". We know, the importance of winning those aerial duels, but he's also quick. You speak to people about him as well, and they said, he's ideally suited to playing in a high line because he's got that pace to recover and reads the game well, and he's comfortable with the ball at his feet. So I think when you throw all those things together, you can see exactly why he was at the top of Klopp's summer wish list.
It's all exciting stuff. Everything you've said there, apart from, I think, most Liverpool fans' concerns is the injury record. But again, anyone can get injured. It happens. It's football. Alisson's been injured nearly every season for some spell. It happens. So you can't discount someone just on that basis. If I mention some names, can you give me your understanding of where we're at and if there's any credibility into it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So my first one, and which I'm quite excited about, is Florian Neuhaus.
Yeah, I think he's certainly a player Liverpool have had watched. I think whether it goes any further than that, I think is too soon to say. I mean, I wrote a piece, I think it was around the time that Konate got done, just to say that further business for Liverpool was likely to happen later on in the summer rather than nothing else being imminent. And that must be probably 3 weeks ago now, because I think, of course, the Euros has an impact with, no international manager is going to want players sorting out club futures during the tournament. And I think also for Liverpool, it's not a case of they have to sell to buy. But, there's no doubt that in terms of how much money they've got to spend this summer, it will be influenced by how much they can generate from sales. And that is a difference. I'm not saying they have to sell Harry Wilson to be able to bring in a Wijnaldum replacement, but of course, how much you can generate from, Grujic, I think, is pretty much nailed on to go. Wilson, you've got Origi, potentially Shaqiri, to see what happens with someone like Minamino, and then you've got, probably the lesser lights like Karius and Shea Ojo and people like that. So I think at the moment there's a bit of an unknown in terms of how much Liverpool can generate from that. So are you in the market for, I don't know, a 30 or 40 million pound player, or are you in the market for a 10 or a 20 million pound player? So yeah, I think clearly, I think the other priorities this summer have to be another centre midfielder and another attacking option, because I think I know when I wrote that piece a few weeks ago, I was told that that a Wijnaldum replacement wasn't viewed as like an absolute necessity, because the people I spoke to who said that we'll look at Fabinho won't be playing centre half next season, so he'll be back in that midfield as a permanent fixture. Of course, Thiago is going to be much more influential as well. You'll have Henderson back from injury. They see Curtis Jones playing a lot more football, but I still think it would be a real risk not to replace Wijnaldum when you look at the amount of minutes he played, as much as, aside from the fact he was such a complete midfielder. And I think, you have to be honest and say, well, you don't know what you're going to get out of Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain if they stay put, which, Klopp said towards the end of the season that he still retained faith in them. And if that is the case, and if they do stay put, well, with the injuries they've had, I think it requires a leap of faith to think that one of those is just suddenly going to become, a key part of that midfield again. So yeah, the midfielder, I think another midfielder is key in my mind. And then I think also, with what we talked about earlier on with Mane and Salah going off to the Africa Cup of Nations, I think coupled with the fact that you've got the Olympics as well. We don't know what's going to happen there at the start of the season in terms of potentially Minamino and Salah wanted for the Olympics as overage players, and then I just think surely the time has come where you've got to upgrade on Divock Origi. I think Divock Origi is an absolute legend for the iconic moments that he's given us over the years, but you can't, as much as you love Divock Origi and he's such a great fella, I just think surely a parting of the ways makes sense for all parties this summer, because it has gone stale for him at Liverpool in terms of from the glorious high of that night in Madrid in 2019 and signing that new contract subsequently. So I think the only thing for Liverpool there is is probably his stock has fallen. Where it's probably where a year ago you were talking about 20, potentially even 25 million for Origi. I think probably going to have to be a bit more realistic at 12 to 15. I think maybe because the fact that he didn't make the Belgium squad for the Euros and it wasn't even on the standby list, I think that kind of shows you where he's at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, he must be thinking himself that it'd be in his interest to move on. So we were chatting about a replacement for Origi there. Have you heard any? There's rumours about Patson Daka. Have you heard anything to contradict that, or have you heard any positivity that the club would be interested in someone like that?
No, I must have. I've not heard anything concrete whatsoever on Daka. So he's a player that keeps on getting linked, but then to be honest, at the moment it seems like there's about 3 or 4 new names every day that gets thrown up. So no, like I said, I think it was thing. I think anything like that will be later on in the window. Liverpool don't report back to pre-season till the 12th of July. I think ideally Klopp would love to have the squad pretty much where he wants it by then, but I think also that he will know that's just not realistic this summer with the Euros, with the Copa America, with the way that the transfer market is, with the lack of money that's sloshing around at the moment as COVID continues to take its toll. So I think despite the fact that ideally you want to get things done early, I think it's inevitable that there'll be a lot of business late on.
Yeah. I mean, just bearing in mind that the financial aspects you were talking about there, does that take Tielemans out of the equation for you?
Whether it takes him out of the equation, I'm not sure. I mean, I think he's a fantastic footballer, Tielemans. Where I question how realistic it was you're talking about trying to take a starter off another top 5, top 6 Premier League club, and as we know, that will come with a massive premium. Yeah. So that's what makes me doubt that. I mean, I'm sure if you ask Klopp, do you like Tielemans? I'm sure the answer would be yes. Who doesn't like Tielemans? But I'm just not convinced that he would be available at a price that would that would make sense really. And the same, I suppose, another name that keeps on getting mentioned is Rafinha at Leeds as as a potential attacking option. But again, we know when you do business with other Premier League clubs that you do end up paying a premium. So yeah, players like that, I'm sure they are on Liverpool's radar. Of course they are, because they've been performing at the highest level. But yeah, certainly at the moment, I'm not aware that anything is close to becoming a reality.
Okay. Before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you about a couple of Liverpool players. First of all, Nat Phillips. I watched his interview the other day with the Echo, and there was something I saw on Twitter before that Newcastle might be interested in, Burnley might be interested in. What's your understanding of Nat Phillips's future?
Yeah, well, I think I was told recently that the plan is that Nat Phillips will do pre-season, certainly start pre-season at Liverpool. I think there is a decision to be made there by all parties. I think it's probably too. I wouldn't say with any degree of certainty he will go or he will stay, because I think genuinely I don't think parties even know that what will happen there. Because I think the other big thing at the moment is not knowing exactly what kind of shape Van Dijk, Gomez and Matip are in come the start of the season. Because what you can't do is you might get an attractive offer for Nat Phillips now, but then in 5-6 weeks time, one of those three centre backs coming back is, it turns out they're not as far down the road as initially thought, and then you've left yourself short. So
I'm very much in the 5 centre backs camp. I think we need 5 going into the season.
I think absolute minimum. I think it's 5. Yeah. I think it's 5, and then because I think the other thing is, I think I look at Reece Williams and I think he's a player that could probably do with a loan next season.
Yeah.
So I think it has to be 5 centre backs, and then whether you have Konaté as the 6th centre back maybe, but it's got to be 5.
But 5 and Fabinho basically.
Yeah. Absolute minimum, because more than anything else, we know that players who come back from serious long-term injuries, they quite often come back and are absolutely fine for a few weeks and then pick up little niggling issues that then sideline them for a little bit. Then when you throw into the mix, Joel Matip, his injury record even before this latest one was terrible as well. And touch wood, Joe Gomez had played a lot more football in recent years, but before that he'd had a couple of serious injuries. So 5 centre backs, absolute minimum. Obviously the 3 lads coming back, you've got Konate. But to be honest, I hope Nat Phillips stays. I hope he stays as whether it is kind of 4th or 5th choice. Because I just think he's such a useful player to have around, and he's also he's such a down to earth, humble, decent fella that he's great to have around. He's not going to be one of those people that if they're not playing, he becomes a bit of a headache. So no, I hope he stays around, but I can also see if those 3 centre backs we mentioned, if they come back in pre-season, they're all staying fit and healthy, performing to a decent level. Konate hits the ground running. And Nat Phillips is thinking, well, hang on a minute, I could go to somewhere else and play Premier League football every week. Then I could understand why there could potentially be a deal to be done there. But I think one thing we do know is that his value will have gone up a hell of a lot in the space of 12 months compared to whatever it was. It was a very nominal fee that Swansea were going to be paying for him when he was on the verge of going there a year ago. And, now, having proved that, he belongs in the Premier League, to me, he's probably, I don't even know what you price him at. 8 million, maybe 8 to 10. I don't think that's ridiculous when you see what he did for Liverpool during that run-in. So from Liverpool's perspective, there may even be a feeling that, his value may never be higher than it is this summer. But then you have to balance that with the fact you might actually need Nat Phillips to stick around.
Is there a reality where Ben Davies actually plays football?
Well, again, and I checked that one out recently in terms of what the future holds for him. And I was told that he'd been told that they're not actively looking to move him on, and that they see Ben Davies doing pre-season. And I think that probably ties in with what I said before of they know that they can't leave themselves short, and they don't know exactly 100% what shape Van Dijk, Gomez and Matip are in. The last I heard, Gomez was the more advanced of the three in terms of his rehab. But I think it's common sense says that, if you get to, into pre-season and those players are coming back and look fit and healthy, and Davies isn't getting much of a look in, then I'm sure there could potentially be a move there. But again, I think I wrote about it recently that Ben Davies was told by Klopp that he sees parallels with Andy Robertson's tough first 6 months at Liverpool and having to bed in and adjust to the style and all the rest of it. So, but yeah, whether we'll ever see Ben Davies playing a competitive game for Liverpool, I've got my doubts, because of course there were opportunities to use him during the run-in, and
he wasn't very fit, to be honest with you. Was he?
No, but he did. He had a calf problem. He had a calf problem that hampered him a few times. So I think there were a couple of occasions where it looked like he might be involved, and then he was very unfortunate. He did pick up a calf problem, but of course when you come in, when there was such a dearth of centre-backs, and then you can't get a game, and then that Liverpool have just spent 35 million on another centre-back. They've got 3 other centre-backs, including the best centre-back in the world, coming back from injury. I'm sure he must be looking at it thinking, will I ever make that Liverpool debut? But, at the moment, it looks like he'll be involved in the friendlies unless a decent offer comes in between.
I've kind of got it in my head that he just needs a Jurgen Klopp pre-season.
Yeah, I'm sure that will help him.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I know, because he didn't play, some people have said to me, clearly it was like almost, Liverpool bought him with no intention of paying him, no intention of playing him, to then sell him on and make a profit. But from what I've been told, that's not the case. They did, it wasn't like they plucked him out of nowhere. They had him watched extensively previously.
Williams was very, very complimentary about him in an interview he did months and months and months before we even signed him.
Yeah. So he was, he was, of course he was available, at a very small fee because of his contract situation. But yeah, I don't go along with the idea that he was bought just to not to play him and then sell him on, because the reality was Liverpool were desperate for centre backs. I just think they didn't anticipate that he would need as long as he needed to bed in, and then add that with the injury problems he had as well, and he obviously never had the chance to show any of us what he can do.
Just before I let you go, one player that does excite me for next season is Harvey Elliott. Massive fan. And I don't know how you feel about Harvey Elliott, but obviously he's had a great loan away at Blackburn. What have you heard with regards to Harvey's role next season at the club?
Yeah, well, again, he's been told he will be doing pre-season at Liverpool. He can't wait to get back and show Klopp how much he's developed in the last 12 months, because he could have stayed put last season. But he was desperate to play football, and he not only did he go and do that on a regular basis, but he absolutely lit up the Championship with Blackburn, and his goals and assists, and the way in which the people there speak about him, just underlines how much of an impact he made. So he's still very young. He's still learning his trade, of course, but he doesn't want to go anywhere next season. He wants to stay put and prove to Klopp that he can be someone he can rely on as Liverpool embark on a challenge for the Premier League title. So again, I think with Harvey Elliott, probably the ball's in his court in terms of what happens in pre-season. Of course, if Liverpool were to bring in another attacking player, how does that impact in terms of what minutes he's likely to get? But yeah, at the moment, I'd be absolutely amazed if Liverpool loaned him out again, because I just don't really see what benefit there would be. I think you're much better off keeping someone like Harvey Elliott on board, and because I think certainly when you look at, say for example, Shaqiri goes, I would rather watch Harvey Elliott play, to be honest. Anyway, I think he is the future of Liverpool. He's such an exciting talent, and so yeah, I hope I know that's Harvey's plan. Have a big pre-season, prove you belong at Liverpool for the 2021-22 season, and yeah, he's more than capable of doing that.
Great stuff, mate. Well, thanks very much. Have you got anything you're writing at the moment that people should be looking out for?
Yeah, a few interviews in the pipeline at the moment. So obviously looking into with some of our data guys at the Athletic in terms of which potential midfielders around Europe could fit the bill in terms of a Wijnaldum replacement, and then also meeting up tomorrow with a couple of the ex-Liverpool Academy lads who have just been released to kind of tell their stories and what it's like being released and looking back on their time at Liverpool and what the future holds for them, because of course, as we know, it's such a small number that absolutely make the grade in terms of those Premier League academies, and for a lot of the other boys, it's a case of picking up the pieces when they do get released and look into the future. So it should be plenty of stuff over on the Athletic.
So anyway, James, thanks very much for your time, mate. Really, really appreciate it. And if you want to read James's articles, they are on the Athletics. Well worth subscribing to. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please click like and subscribe to film your videos. Thanks very much. Cheers, James. Thanks a lot, mate.
Sorted. Cheers, Gav.